Welcome back, everybody, to this kind of experimental show I'm trying to work on here called The Year in Television. We're still early on into 1989. It's February 1989. I was about 1 month old, of course, when this was going on, so I think you get kind of the gist of what we're doing here. So, again, this is kind of an experiment I'm trying to work with here. It's not going to be the best overall, so I will always accept options on how to make the show better. So please, if you like this, or if you want to see some changes overall, on how I do this, let me know down below. Because like I said, this is something that I'm just starting to put it together here. So I will tell you that this month in particular, not really a whole lot in television in general, compared to what we had in January. We had, like, I think over 20 things to talk about 20 things in general here. This one, less than that. I mean, more than half of that. Probably about, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 shows in general. Only 7 of them premiered in the month of February because there was one show on here that I should have brought up in the January segment. So might as well talk about it here. Let's go ahead and start off with that one, and that is USA's Up All Night.
I'm Gilbert Gottfried, and I lust after a lot of things, like I lust after these 2 films, Lust for Freedom and Squeeze Play. Both of them on USA Up All Night.
Tomorrow at 11, 10 Central.
Once again, this is something I should have brought up on the January segment of this, but this premiered on January 7th, 1989, with Gilbert Gottfried as the host. Gilbert Gottfried, at that point, had been mostly known from his early works on Saturday Night Live when he was on that first season after the original Not Ready for Primetime Players left, but this is basically a show where it consists primarily of low-budget films, bookended by in-studio or on-location comedy skits featuring the show's host. One of the early hosts alongside Gilbert Gottfried was Caroline Schlitt, but the more prevalent host would come a couple years later with Rhonda Shear coming in. And in addition to the skits, the host would also provide sardonic comments about the feature films and observations on various Hollywood and or New York City area clubs and attractions when the show was shooting outside of its studio, including commercials, and the program typically ran mostly from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. It ranged from cult classics, B-movies, to other fare not appearing on television frequently, and they would also show a lot of sexploitation films with the explicit content edited out. So it's kind of a mix between Mystery Science Theater 3000, a little bit mixed in with Insomniac with Dave Attell, since they're going out to all these different places overall. And it was an odd show, but it was a show that really was engaging when you watched it back in the day, and I mean, it was cool seeing these movies that you don't usually see on a night like this, and it ran for a very long time. It ran for nearly 10 seasons and lasted all the way into 1998, so there was an audience in demand for this show in general, and it really did last a very long time. They were changing time slots over the course of the next couple of years, especially when USA incorporated original programming. Like when Duckman came into the lineup, they changed around the schedule to the point where the show had to trim down its usual schedule overall. But yeah, it was a very interesting show overall, something that you didn't usually see anywhere really, and it was a unique experience overall. It was a unique experience in general, and I think it's still going on to this very day. I don't know for certain where it's at, but when I was looking up Rhonda Shear for this, it said the show was still going on, so I don't know exactly where it's going on right now, but yeah, apparently it's still on the air somewhere, and I think there is an opening for it somewhere. I'm pretty sure maybe it's probably an online thing, like here on YouTube somewhere, but I don't know. I have to do my research on that, but yeah, I remember Up All Night. It was an intriguing little show to watch, but yeah, I snuck watching it when I was a little kid, so that should probably tell you everything you need to know about that one. But let's go ahead and move on to some of the stuff from February itself, starting off with one of the big miniseries of the month, probably the biggest miniseries of the month, and that was CBS's Lonesome Dove.
Emmy winner Tommy Lee Jones is Woodrow Call.
I hate rude behavior in a man. Won't tolerate it.
His word was law.
Why not go up to Montana?
But his strict code belied a hidden torment.
Now, he's the only son you'll ever have.
I don't know that he is my son. His story begins on Lonesome Dove tonight.
I do think it's kind of funny that Tommy Lee Jones is the main focus of the marketing for that particular promo, even though Robert Duvall is not mentioned one bit there, and he's the one that had the Oscar. And it's fitting because Robert Duvall recently passed away, so I figure, why not? But now's the perfect time to probably talk about this. This is, of course, based off of the best-selling novel, and it's arguably one of the best miniseries ever made by a lot of people, but It's Texas late 1800s, and you have two retired Texas Rangers, Augustus Gus McRae and Woodrow Call, who run a cattle ranch outside the small town of Lonesome Dove. The quiet life is not for them, and the ranch is not prospering, so when a fellow ex-ranger, Jake Spoon, arrives and tells them of the opportunities in Montana and suggests they move there, they consider his suggestion. Soon they have made up their minds and embark on an epic 1,500-mile journey facing dangers on all sides. So, yeah, this is one of those epic miniseries featuring a cast that also includes Danny Glover, Diane Lane, Angelica Houston. Back when they put money into these miniseries, and it really shows. Like you also have Robert Urich. What the hell was I saying? Robert Urich, Frederick Forster, D.D. Sweeney, Ricky Schroeder, Chris Cooper, Glenn Heady. So there was a lot of really, really big people involved in this. Now, Steve Buscemi's also in this as well. See, this is what I think Horizon was trying to be for Kevin Costner. This big, sweeping, epic miniseries set in the Old West. And the reason why that didn't work was because it really felt like there really wasn't a high demand for a story of that caliber, especially what Kevin Costner was doing here. Plus, it's better to have it on TV like Lonesome Dove did, because you get to sit at your home, you get to take breaks while watching it. And not only that, I think it is a much more engaging storyline than something like Horizon is. And you have a strong cast featuring a great performance by Robert Duvall and Tommy Lee Jones, and you could tell the scope and scale of this miniseries was in this production overall. I mean, this was, to put it this way, this did better than the big miniseries on ABC, War and Remembrance, which is something we'll get to later on in the year. But yeah, this thing in particular was so much better in terms of the scope and scale, the storytelling, the captivity of it. You got so invested in the storyline. And it works because the director, Simon Windsor, does a very good job of handling the storyline. It's based off of a screenplay by Peter Bogdanovich. I mean, it's a thing that just works all across the board. It's a really, really good miniseries. And with Robert Duvall recently passing away, it's definitely something you might want to check out if you're looking for some of his great works. This is definitely one worth checking out if you haven't seen it, Lonesome Dove. So, moving on to the next big thing, we have Friday night's main event.
Friday's a knockout night of big ring action. Fight card number 1 is Friday night's main event, starring Hulk Hogan and a Macho Man. Fight card number 2, Crockett and Tubbs in an explosive Miami Vice. Fight card number 3 is tag team action when David Soul leads a special team in the series premiere of Unsub, Unknown Subject. A knockout night, the main event, Miami Vice, Unsub, Friday.
More on Unsub in a little bit here, but of course the big thing is Friday night's main event 2. This was the event where, for those of you that don't remember this, back in the 1980s, when Saturday Night Live was not on TV, NBC would loan the time slot out to the WWE for what they called Saturday Night's Main Event. They had been doing this since 1985, and they would do it until Fox took it over in 1992 for a couple of events. But the thing only lasted until 1992, until it was eventually brought back recently by NBC. But they would have these primetime events, and one of the big ones was the Friday night's main event, which was on February 3rd of 1989. And in this one, the slowly building tension between Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage boiled over during the team's matchup against the Twin Towers, leading to the team's breakup upon Savage's heel turn when Savage contended that Hogan was lusting after his manager, Miss Elizabeth. Other events in this one included Andre the Giant defeating Jake Roberts, the famous Rogaris defeating the Hart Foundation, the Ultimate Warrior defeating Greg Valentine, Demolition defeating the Powers of Pain, the Brainbusters defeating the Rockers, Buddhist Beefcake versus Mr. Perfect ending in a double disqualification, Jim Duggan defeating Dino Bravo, the Mega Powers defeating the Twin Towers, and lastly, Ted DiBiase with Virgil defeating Hercules. You can always make the argument that, yes, wrestling is fake, and I think people have come to the realization that, yeah, wrestling's fake, but back in the day, WWE made it so cool that you didn't really care. It was still a ton of fun, and really watching this event later on down the road in my life is when I actually knew what this was. When it was on, they used to play it on TV all the time on ESPN Classic and other stations. But it's a good fun time all around. It was fun to see. It's fun to like Hulk Hogan back when he was likable and not the guy he ended up being before he passed away. But it's cool to see these fights, and this definitely was the definition of a must-see primetime event with the main event, with these two superstars of the time period going at each other and just knocking it out of the park. I mean, I mean, this is just such a good time all across the board. What more can you say about it, man? It was good time. It was the WWF at its absolute best. Back when the WWF meant something, it wasn't just, you know, WWE, because they had to change the name because of the what was it? Now I can't remember. Because of the lawsuit they lost to the World Wildlife Fund.
The Access Channel. Cable 10 is not responsible for the content or views expressed by the participants in this program.
That's right, folks. The excellent duo of Wayne Campbell and Garth Algar made their first debut on national television on Saturday Night Live on February 18th, 1989. Though technically Wayne himself actually was a character much before then. You see, back in 1987, of course, Mike Myers was living in Canada, so he actually first appears as an off-camera character on Much Music before evolving. And he was later seen in a segment called Wayne's Power Minute on the CBC TV series It's Only Rock and Roll. Of course, this is a segment where you have a local public access television program in Aurora, Illinois, hosted by Wayne Campbell, an enthusiastic, long-haired metalhead. Wayne lives with his parents, who broadcast the show live from the basement of his house every Friday evening at 10:30. He also has his best friend Garth Algar, played by Dana Carvey, who developed this character based off of his brother. And in the early sketches, Wayne and Garth were high school students, and their guests would include their teachers, one of them played by Ed O'Neill, who would play a character in the movies, of course, Dan Makita, and other students from their schools, including a babe played by Jan Hooks. Other frequent guests included Garth's father, Beebe, played by Phil Hartman, so named because of his teeth. And he's often ridiculed by Wayne, despite the fact that he was married to Hillary Algar, Candice Bergen, whom Wayne considers a babe. Wayne and Garth made their first appearance on the Leslie Nielsen-hosted episode of SNL on February 18th of 89, and of course would later make 21 appearances, including more recent appearances such as the 2011 episode where Dana Carvey hosted, as well as the Saturday Night Live 40th anniversary special in 2015. And of course, we have the movies and the many reprisals over the years, including appearances on the MTV Video Music Awards in 91, a couple of MTV specials in 92 and 93, the MTV Movie Awards in 2008, and more recently, the 2021 Super Bowl ads for Uber Eats. And, yeah. I mean, what more can you say about Wayne and Garth except that, you know, they were excellent dudes and they made a couple great movies in the process, but this particular week in 1989, February 89, was where it all began. So let's go ahead and move on to our next thing that we have here, and that is the return of Get Smart.
America, Maxwell Smart and 99 are back in town.
Chaos is back in business.
Is that still classified information?
What? Sorry about that.
Be careful.
Don Adams and Barbara Feldon bring a TV classic back with an all-new adventure. Would you believe Get Smart again Sunday?
One of the many Get Smart attempts that kind of came and went before the 2008 movie came out and was a big success. Get Smart again, the second time that Don Adams and Barbara Feldon returned to play the characters that made them famous in 1965. This aired on ABC on February 26, 1989, who actually rejected the original pilot for the show back in the day. This is, of course, based off of the TV series created by Mel Brooks and Buck Henry, and again, like I said, features the returns of Don Adams and Barbara Feldon as Maxwell Smart and Agent 99. And in this movie, Maxwell Smart is called back to duty at Chaos, as Chaos is back causing trouble again, this time with a weather machine. Although instructed to keep his mission secret from his wife, 99, Max can't keep hiding from her forever. And soon the two are working together again in the second Maxwell Smart movie, the first one, of course, being The Nude Bomb, which lived up to its title back in 1980 because it was released in theaters and was a big bomb at the box office. And like I said, there wasn't many big Get Smart successes up until we got to the 2008 film with Steve Carell. There's, of course, a Get Smart reboot in 1995 for Fox. It also featured Andy Dick playing the son of Don Adams and Barbara Feldon, but that show didn't last very long in general. But it was but this one in particular, this was definitely a much more memorable reunion for the original Get Smart crew, besides the Nude Bomb and also the 95 Get Smart series. But it's just good fun times all across the board here. Would have been better if Mel Brooks and Buck Henry had been back to write the script for this and work on this, but they are not involved in this one, unfortunately. So it does kind of miss the charm of the original series, but nevertheless, it was still a fun time all across the board. So there you go. That's Get Smart again. So let's go ahead and move on to our next show. What's Alan watching?
9 Central and Mountain. Now, stay tuned for Eddie Murphy in What's Alan Watching?
whatever Alan's watching, not a lot of people were invested in it. This was a CBS TV pilot. This was back in the day when, CBS and networks in general actually did air TV pilots, failed TV pilots, as special events. And I guess this was a night where they had, I think, Kate and Allie and Newhart postponed for a little bit here. But what's Alan watching? This is produced by Eddie Murphy through his television company and stars Corin Nemec, pre-Parker Lewis Can't Lose, as a 17-year-old couch potato who views life and his family as if they were on television. Libby and Leo played by Peter Michael Getz and Libby played by Barbara Berry, are his parents. Gail, played by Fran Drescher in one of her early TV appearances. Jeff is his brother, played by David Packer, and Alyssa Cheryl Pollack is his girlfriend. Eddie Murphy himself has a cameo in the episode, playing a protester decrying James Brown's incarceration, as well as playing James Brown himself. This is directed by Thomas Schlamme, who go on to become a more prolific television director, mostly with his works with Aaron Sorkin, as he worked on The West Wing, Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, and Sports Night, and aired on CBS on February 27, 1989, as the network did pass on it and making it a regular series. But it did go on to win several awards. It went on to win the TV Critics Award for Outstanding Achievement in Movies, Miniseries, and Specials, and even TV critic Alan Sepinwall named his personal TV blog, What's Alan Watching, after the television program. And it's a very interesting show. It's one of those shows that maybe was a little bit too ahead of its time, but was kind of a precursor eventually to something like a Parker Lewis Can't Lose that Nemec would star in, or even something very similar to this, kind of like Herman's Head, in a way, from both of them from Fox. Actually, both Parker Lewis and Herman's Head were on Fox, if I'm not mistaken, but it's an intriguing idea overall, but again, something that was a little bit too ahead of its time. And for CBS, this was back when, this was a single camera comedy, but this is back when more multi-camera comedies were kind of the norm in general. And to do one that's just a single camera comedy was a little bit too far-fetched at the time. I mean, for God's sakes, there were times when there were shows on there where the networks forced them to put a laugh track on TV shows, like Police Squad, one of those great examples of a show where they tried to force them to put a laugh track on there, but they decided not to do it, and the show kind of failed to get an impact at first, but of course went on to have this big following. And then around this time, there was also a Sledgehammer, which was a great show as well, but yeah, you get the idea. It's kind of ahead of its time. Would have been more interesting to see if it would have gone to become a series. I think it was something that was just a little bit before the time when people would have appreciated it more. And CBS was kind of struggling for some big comedy hits in general at the time, but I don't know. It's a show. It's an intriguing show overall. What's Alan watching? So let's go ahead and move on to another another show that premiered this month, and I wouldn't even say big because it didn't last very long, and that is Unknown Subject, aka Unsub.
Child killer goes free. Crockett vows to get even. Got my word. On an all-new Miami Vice, 1 hour earlier. Then, David Soul leads a high-tech unit designed to stop society's most deadly criminals. The riveting premiere, Unsub, Unknown Subject, following an all-new Miami Vice tonight.
Which literally sounds like what most of my viewers will do once they see videos like this. I'm kidding, of course, but it also sounds like it also sounds almost similar to the Funzo, like from the Simpsons, like Unsub. But this is Unsub, aka Unknown Subject, which premiered on the same night as the main event 2, and it stars David Soul and revolves around an elite FBI forensics team that investigates serial murders and other violent crimes. It also features Emmett Walsh among its cast, including and also a young Richard Kind and also Jerome Moroso. This is, of course, and this is also created by Stephen J. Cannell, who at the time had a lot of memorable, was a well-known television producer. Of course, this is the guy who was also behind several NBC shows like Hunter. There was also the A-Team, which had just been canceled a couple of years prior to this. There was also the other shows like The Greatest American Hero, 21 Jump Street at Fox, J.J. Starbuck, Baba Black Sheep, a lot of shows. He was a big, big deal around that time. And yeah, this was a show where it was kind of like with What's Alan's Watching. It's kind of a show that's ahead of its time in terms of, it didn't look like it much. It looked like kind of a formulaic procedural show, but this is a show that did kind of eventually lead into a new era of crime procedurals, basically redefining CBS's schedule, especially in the late 2000s, because this is kind of a precursor to stuff like the CSI franchise or the NCIS franchise. And it was also kind of cool because they took a lot of inspiration from the then recently released Manhunter movie from which featured Michael Mann, who also was also a big deal on NBC for what he did with Miami Vice, which was coming to an end during this point in time. So it was a show that was definitely unique for the time period, and kind of like what I said before with What's Alan Watching, maybe a little bit ahead of its time, maybe before people really understood the true power of these procedural TV shows and their longevity. I mean, you've had a lot of shows since this who have gone on to become massive hits and are still running this very day. Like I mentioned before, the CSI franchise, the NCIS franchise, Law and Order. Like, this was kind of one of those shows that kind of broke the mold in general, and it's a cool show to watch overall. You get to see young appearances by people like Kevin Spacey, Randall Wallace, who would later go on to write the Oscar-winning script for Braveheart. A lot of good things about the show in general here. I think it mostly failed because the title Unsub seemed like it was kind of cool for the time, but it didn't really have kind of a lasting impact overall. So, yeah, unfortunately, I could see why the show was a little bit too ahead of its time and kind of got canceled when it did, but it did pave the way for a lot of these shows that we've come to know since then. So, there's at least that. But let's go ahead and move on to our last thing that we have here, and this was easily the most successful thing to come out of this lineup of shows from February of 1989, which is...
Did you misunderstand the goal here, Fred? I think I'm retaining putter. Hayden Fox is a man dedicated to himself.
Mom said you used to get kind of upset after you lost a game.
The team lost the game, I didn't. Now he's dedicated to his daughter.
I have this feeling you're dying to know about my date.
A sneak preview of Coach, February 28th.
Man, talk about a great show Coach was, man. This is a show that I came into very late on in my life. I think I started watching the show when it was when they started playing it on, like, Wheels Network, and I seen little bits and pieces when they were showing reruns on USA. I never watched the original run of it, but, man, I'm so glad I found the show when I did, because this show is friggin' great, man. Craig T. Nelson stars as Hayden Fox, the head coach of a university football team, and eats, sleeps, and lives football. His partner, played by Shirley Fabers, however, does not share his passion for the sport, which frequently causes friction in their relationship. When Hayden also often fits the stereotype of dumb jock, as does his co-workers Luther and Dauber, played by Jerry Van Dyke, the brother of Dick Van Dyke, and Bill Fagerbach, who is also known to many as the voice of Patrick Star from SpongeBob SquarePants. Yeah, I got the names correct. I thought they got the names screwed up, but he sincerely cares about his friends and family and tries the best to make things work out. And this is, of course, a show where it started off kind of slow. It didn't really get a big push in general. They tried giving it the best time slot possible. They put it on after this new hit they had just premiered at the time, Roseanne. And then they brought it back for a second season, but they had to wait for another ABC show, Chicken Soup, with Jackie Mason to premiere and kind of fade away. And then once that show ended, it was just all hands on deck. The show went on for 9 seasons. They actually took the show out of the university and made him into a NFL coach for an Orlando football team later on down the road. And the show overall was very funny. There's a lot of great funny moments on the show because the cast overall is so damn good. Craig T. Nelson just fits this role of Hayden Fox so well. And Jerry Van Dyke and Bill Fagerbach really do work well together. Like, it's funny because they didn't even want to cast Jerry Van Dyke as Luther Van Dam over at ABC. The series creator Barry Kemp really wanted to cast him for that role after he was rejected from CBS from another show that he had created, Newhart, for the George Utley role, but ABC didn't want him because the perception was that Van Dyke wasn't funny, and then Kemp basically disagreed, and ABC would only agree to Van Dyke if he had auditioned for a role, knowing how bad he was at auditioning. Kemp told ABC that Van Dyke was on a months-long tour for the opening act of Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet, something Van Dyke was doing, but in reality, the concert dates were only for about a week. So Kemp asked ABC if he could send him an episode of Coming of Age, another show that he did with Van Dyke that he guest on, to display how funny he actually was instead of auditioning him. And ABC basically loved that performance and agreed to his casting. So yeah, that was something where, it proved to be a big success overall. Van Dyke would later go on to get multiple Emmy nominations for the role of Luther, and the show overall was just really, really funny because of that great chemistry between not just those three, but everybody involved in the show. You do like these characters a lot. You do like Shelley Fabers as the love interest for Hayden Fox. You do like his daughter, played by Claire Carey, who they kind of get rid of halfway through the show. You like the boyfriend that she has, Stewart. You like all these characters they have on here, and it's it was just funny, man. It was just a really, really funny show. They took all advantages of not only the ideas that they had with it, the whole idea is not just making it a sports comedy, but also making it a family comedy in its own merits, plus that theme song overall, man. Like, you can't listen to that song and not just start humming the crap out of it when it starts playing. It was a great show, man. It was a great show that I used to watch all the time in reruns, and I still love it today. Coach definitely is probably the best overall thing that came out in February of 1989, and it was fun. And like I said, it was one of those happy little accidents that kind of went on to become this big thing overall. Went on for 9 seasons, 200 episodes. It was a great show. Great show indeed. So there you go. That is everything from February 1989. And like I said, not a whole lot compared to last month, but we'll definitely fix that up in March of 1989 because I've already got the list right here. And there's a lot to talk about, from the controversial Pepsi Madonna ad with the music video Like a Prayer, events that happened during the Motorcraft Quality Parts 500, the Academy Awards that year, which featured one of the more infamous moments in Oscar history, Elvis Costello coming to SNL for the first time ever, and some notable TV shows, including shows that are still on the air to this very day, including one of the more groundbreaking reality shows of the time period. And this was also the month that we saw Scott Bakula in a sci-fi TV series on NBC that went on to become a massive hit, along with a couple of other shows that we'll talk about here. But we'll save that all for next month. So with all that said, thanks for joining us on here. Hope you've been enjoying this, and hopefully we can continue to do this going forward every month. So I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. See you then.